she smiled. Are you always this helpful, or just with me? I wasn't supposed to notice her, not really. But when she walked into the cafe that morning, the way the light caught her hair, how she frowned at the crossword puzzle in front of her, I couldn't look away. I pushed my chair back, hoping I didn't make too much noise, and reached for the sugar packets. My hands were shaking, though I couldn't tell if it was from the cold outside or from just being near her. She didn't look up at first, just murmured something to the barista about her usual, and I caught the slight crease between her brows. I wanted to smooth it out, as ridiculous as that sounded. I'd seen her around before. Not often, but enough that her presence had started to pull at me in ways I didn't fully understand. She was different. Older, yes, but not in the way people usually mean it. There was a calmness about her, a kind of quiet authority wrapped in a softness that made people lean in without realizing it. I carried the tray over and set it down near her table. She looked up then, startled, and for a heartbeat, I forgot how to speak. Thanks, she said, her voice low but warm. And then, almost teasing, she added, Are you always this helpful, or just with me? My chest hitched. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out too breathy. I guess I like seeing you smile, I said before I could stop myself. She raised her eyebrows, leaning back slightly, as if weighing whether I was serious. The small corner of her lips turned up. That tiny smile, it should have been simple, but it felt like a door had opened somewhere inside me. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make her laugh, but I couldn't. So I sat across from her, letting the silence stretch just long enough for it to feel meaningful. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger, and I noticed how deliberate her movements were, almost meditative, almost fragile. You're young to have this patience, she said finally, her eyes flicking up to mine. Most people your age would have run off somewhere, checking their phones or trying to impress someone. I shrugged, though my stomach tightened. Maybe I'm not most people. Her gaze lingered, softer now, with something like curiosity, maybe even a hint of admiration. I could feel the pull between us, an invisible thread, gentle but insistent. It scared me, honestly. I wasn't supposed to feel like this for someone older. Someone untouchable, it seemed. And yet I couldn't help it. The cafe hummed around us, coffee machines, quiet chatter, the occasional scrape of a chair, but it felt like a bubble had formed, and we were the only two in it. My fingers brushed against the edge of the tray again, an excuse to touch something near her without being too forward. She noticed, I think. She smiled faintly, the kind that promised more than words ever could. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, though my curiosity burned. I didn't want anything to interrupt this fragile moment. But as I glanced back at her, ready to speak again, the cafe doors swung open behind her, letting in a gust of cold wind. She flinched, and I instinctively reached to close the door. Her eyes met mine across the small table. That look, quiet, unguarded, electric, was enough to make my heart pound faster than I thought it could. And just as I opened my mouth, unsure what to say next, the doorbell chimed again. Not the cafe's. Someone was outside, someone who shouldn't be there. Her head tilted slightly, the smile fading just enough to notice the shadow of tension. She whispered, almost to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. Did you hear that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes were fixed on hers, and in that moment the world shrank until it was just us, and a question hanging between us that neither of us dared speak. I watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her fingers brushing her neck like she was trying to soothe herself, or maybe me. My mind was a storm of thoughts I couldn't quite voice. She wasn't just older, she carried a gravity that made me feel unmoored. Every glance, every small smile, hinted at experiences I could barely imagine, years of things I hadn't lived through yet. I knew she had been married once, from the way she mentioned the apartment, in passing, a past life folded into her carefully measured words. There was a softness in her tone, but underneath it, I could feel the residue of disappointment, the tiny tremors of regret she tried to hide behind humor. I had a lifetime of eagerness, impulsiveness, and fear, and I knew she could see right through it. She stirred her coffee slowly, deliberately, and I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I found myself tracing patterns on the table with my finger, pretending I wasn't paying attention to the way her gaze kept returning to mine. There was a risk here I couldn't ignore. My 20-something naivety whispered that nothing could come of this, that the world would judge. She, with her calm authority and quiet wisdom, knew the stakes better than anyone. And yet neither of us walked away. Every accidental brush of our hands across the table felt like a promise we weren't ready to name. "You always seem calm," I said finally, my voice low. "Even when things go wrong." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Calm is a luxury," she murmured. "I've learned it the hard way." Her words sank into me. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I didn't. I didn't want to pull back the curtain of her past, not yet. Instead, I let the quiet stretch, letting us sit in the delicate space between curiosity and fear. There were moments in life you couldn't explain, how someone could enter your world and unmake your carefully constructed boundaries. She was that for me. And I knew, somewhere deep down, that she felt the same. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. A mirror held up, reflecting all the longing neither of us dared voice. I remembered a night a few weeks ago when I had walked past her apartment on my way home. I had lingered just outside, pretending to check my phone, but really hoping for a glimpse of her lighted window, the faint sound of music, the rhythm of her life unfolding without me. That memory was sharp, sudden, like an ache I could almost touch. She looked up then, catching my stare, and for a second, we were suspended in the tension of everything unsaid. I wanted to reach across the table, to brush my fingers against hers, but fear held me back. Instead, our eyes locked, and I felt the heat of a connection deeper than words could carry. And then, without speaking, she moved her cup closer to mine, so our hands almost touched across the table. The faint warmth radiated through me like electricity. A silent acknowledgement passed between us, a question, a dare, a promise. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. I think I'd like to know more about you." Her lips curved into that slow, careful smile again, one that carried 100 hidden meanings. She didn't answer, not yet. She just reached for her napkin, and in that tiny movement, the air between us thickened with possibility. And for the first time that morning, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wanted me to stay. I didn't hear the footsteps at first. The cafe was quiet again, save for the hum of the espresso machine. But then the door swung open, and a familiar voice, deep, steady, and just a little too sharp, cut across the room. "Laura?" Her head snapped up. The warmth in her eyes evaporated instantly, replaced by that measured calm she always wore like armor. My stomach sank. I recognized him from a few neighborhood mentions, though I hadn't ever met him before. Her ex-husband, or someone close enough to matter, leaned in, carrying a folder, his presence authoritative, casual, but heavy. I wanted to stand, to disappear behind the counter, but my body refused. My fingers curled around my coffee cup, knuckles white. She straightened, smoothing her hair and tucking herself behind the table like it could shield her from this intrusion. "Mark," she said evenly, though I caught the tiny hitch in her breath. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. "We need to discuss." His eyes flicked to me briefly. That quick glance was enough. I felt exposed, like a secret stretched tight across the cafe, and my pulse thumped so loudly I feared he could hear it. I tried to shrink, to make myself invisible. But then her hand brushed mine, light, almost accidental, but deliberate enough to send heat straight to my chest. I couldn't look away from her, not even as Mark's gaze shifted fully to her. "I'll call you later," she said. No, she couldn't. That wasn't how she spoke to him. There was a hesitation, a pause charged with something unspoken, before she pushed her chair back slightly, standing just enough to signal she wasn't retreating completely. I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of everything. My fingers twitched, wanting to reach out and anchor us together, even as her vulnerability radiated like a silent plea I wasn't supposed to answer. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though it felt like I was shouting inside. She turned to me, a single eyebrow raised, her lips tight. "I'm fine." But the word didn't land. It never did when it came from her. I could see the tension coiled in her shoulders, and the slight tremor of her hands. Mark leaned in, oblivious or unwilling to notice the silent electricity between us. He spoke again, and I realized she was listening politely, nodding, but her eyes kept flicking back to me. Every glance was loaded with unspoken words, with danger, with possibility. And then, my courage got ahead of me. I reached for her hand, just brushing the back of it. She didn't pull away immediately. Not yet. But her eyes widened, and I knew the moment was fragile, like glass, threatening to shatter. Mark's voice faded to background noise. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. I could smell her perfume, faint, warm, intoxicating. I could feel her heartbeat in the small space between our hands. And suddenly, I understood everything I had been holding back, the attraction, the fear, the impossible risk of what we might become. "Maybe we should talk later?" I whispered, though I didn't know if it was a suggestion or a plea. She glanced around, hesitant, lips parted as if she wanted to argue, to stop me, to keep things impossible. Instead, she just squeezed my hand lightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but enough to make the world tilt on its axis. And just as quickly as it started, Mark's attention returned to her, oblivious to the tension crackling across the table. She let go of my hand, sliding it back to her lap. But the air between us was electric. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, we sat in silence, knowing the line had been crossed, but neither of us daring to say it. Alloy couldn't focus. Not on the work I had spread across my desk, not on the phone buzzing insistently with messages I didn't want to read. My mind kept replaying that brief touch, the ghost of her hand brushing mine, and the way her eyes had lingered on me before Mark had returned her attention. I didn't want to admit it, but jealousy had wormed its way in, sharp and bitter. I imagined him leaning closer, pretending to joke, brushing her arm with that practiced familiarity. And every time I did, a tightening grew in my chest, and I had to force myself to breathe. Later that evening, I found her sitting alone on a park bench, the fading sunlight making her hair glow like copper in fire. She hadn't noticed me yet. I wanted to say something casual, anything, but the words caught in my throat. My heart was thundering in my ears, loud enough to scare me. "Hey," I finally said, trying for calm. My voice sounded stranger to me than to her. She looked up, startled, and then smiled, soft, hesitant, but with a flicker of warmth that made my knees feel weak. "You're persistent," she said, almost teasing. But the tension in her shoulders told a different story. I can't stop thinking about earlier," I said before I could stop myself. The confession slipped out, raw and unpolished. "About you. About us." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head slightly, but not enough to shut me down. "We shouldn't," she whispered. And yet her voice held a tremor I couldn't ignore. I took a step closer, and she didn't move away immediately. "I don't care," I admitted, voice low. "I shouldn't feel this way, I know, but I do. Every time I see you, She cut me off, pressing a hand to her mouth, staring at the ground. "I can't, not right now," she said. There was fear there, yes, but also something else, a pull that made me want to throw caution aside entirely. The park was nearly empty, just the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of leaves. My hand hovered near hers, and I wanted to bridge the space between us, to finally close the distance. But I hesitated, because I could feel the weight of everything unspoken, the taboo, the risk, the invisible lines we shouldn't cross. Then her phone buzzed, and she glanced down. Her expression tightened. A message. I didn't dare ask. But I could see the conflict written across her face, longing, guilt, and something I couldn't name, all tangled together. I wanted to take her hand anyway, to anchor her to me, to promise her that I didn't care about the world outside this moment. She met my gaze, and for a long heartbeat, we simply held each other with our eyes, the space between us charged, electric, impossible. I could feel it, every beat of my heart screaming that the line was about to break, that something was going to happen that neither of us could undo. And then, just as I took a step forward, ready to close the distance, a car door slammed nearby. She flinched. I froze. And in that instant, the tension between us thickened, palpable, hanging like a storm cloud that could break at any second. We were on the edge, both of us knowing it, both of us terrified, and neither of us willing to step back. The next morning, I woke to a flood of texts I hadn't expected. One from Mark. One from her. One from someone I didn't even recognize, but the message cut through me like ice. I saw you yesterday. Don't make this messy. My hands shook as I read it, reread it, and then read it again. The clarity hit me like a punch. Someone had been watching. Someone knew, or at least suspected, everything. And suddenly, the careful world we had been building in stolen moments felt impossibly fragile. I went to the cafe, hoping she'd be there. She was, as usual, seated with her notebook open, a pen poised but unmoving. Her eyes lifted when I entered, and for a moment, relief softened her features. But then I saw the shadow in her gaze, the tension in her posture. Something had shifted overnight. Did something happen? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart felt like it had jumped into my throat. She shook her head slowly, but her fingers fidgeted with the pen, twisting it in ways she didn't usually allow herself. It's complicated, she said finally, her voice tight. Someone saw us. Or maybe just you. I don't know how much. The weight of her words crashed over me. My chest tightened. I had imagined every possible risk, every possible consequence, but the idea that we were being watched, exposed, made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. I don't care what anyone thinks, I said quickly, more firmly than I felt. My voice faltered, and I swallowed hard. I just want to be with you. Even if it's messy. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't smile. Instead, she closed the notebook with a soft snap, a gesture that made the air between us thrum with tension. It's not just messy, she said. It could ruin a lot. More than either of us realizes. My stomach dropped. My mind spun through every possible scenario, neighbors, friends, family. And yet, in that moment, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I didn't want to step back. Not really. Not if it meant losing her. She leaned back, gaze dropping to the table for a long, tense silence. I watched her, memorizing every small detail. The way her fingers drummed nervously against the wood, the faint crease in her forehead I hadn't noticed before. And in that pause, the vulnerability between us felt almost unbearable. I don't know if I can keep hiding like this, I said finally, letting my voice break. I can't not feel this. Not for you. Her eyes met mine again, stormy, conflicted, yet undeniably drawn. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then reached across the table. Her hand hovered just above mine, trembling, hesitant. The cafe seemed to fade around us, leaving only the charge of the moment, the unspoken choices, the danger we'd just invited. I wanted to take her hand. I wanted to erase all caution and let this thing between us consume every careful plan. And then her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, her face froze, and I saw it before she even spoke. It's him, she whispered, almost a shiver in her voice. Mark. He's coming. Everything shifted. The fragile, electric connection we had been building suddenly hung in the balance, teetering between desire and disaster. I couldn't look away. And I didn't want to. The cafe door swung open again, but this time, I didn't flinch. Mark's shadow fell across the floor, and I saw the tight line of tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled around the notebook like a lifeline. I wanted to shrink, to hide, to pretend none of this mattered, but the truth sat heavy in my chest, impossible to ignore. I couldn't let fear dictate anything anymore. Not when it came to her. She glanced at me, eyes wide, almost pleading, but I saw the same storm mirrored in her expression that had been growing between us for weeks. Desire, risk, longing, and the unbearable weight of possibility. I can't do this alone, I said, stepping closer. My voice was rough, unpolished, but it carried everything I felt. I don't care about the risk. I can't stop feeling this for you. Her lips parted, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might push me away. Instead, she swallowed, her eyes glistening, and said, I've been trying not to, trying to keep control. But I can't. Not anymore. The tension that had hovered between us for weeks finally snapped. I reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't hesitate. Our fingers intertwined, tentative at first, then firmer, as if finding the strength in each other. Mark cleared his throat, drawing her attention. Her hand stiffened in mine, and I felt the moment teeter, fragile as glass. She met his gaze, measured, calm, but I could see the truth in her eyes, what she wanted, what she chose. I need space, she said, not to me, not to him, but to the whole world. And then she looked at me again, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us. But with you, it's real. I can't ignore it. My heart hammered. I didn't ask questions. I didn't hesitate. I simply leaned in, close enough to feel her breath, the faint warmth of her cheek brushing mine. Then we'll figure it out, I whispered. Whatever it takes. She nodded slowly, exhaling like she'd been holding her life in a single breath. There was relief there, yes, but also fear, uncertainty, the kind that made her tremble slightly in my arms. And yet, she didn't pull away. For the first time, I felt it fully, the connection, the danger, the intensity of wanting someone so deeply that nothing else seems to matter. The outside world, the risks, the judgment, they were real, but in that moment, they could wait. We didn't kiss. Not yet. We didn't need words to define what had shifted. Our hands remained intertwined, our shoulders brushing lightly, our breaths mingling in the quiet hum of the cafe. And in that silence, heavy and electric, we understood each other completely for the first time. Every hesitation, every glance, every stolen moment, all of it made sense. The door behind us opened again. Someone walked in, breaking the bubble around us. She tensed slightly, and I squeezed her hand, grounding her, grounding myself. Whatever happened next, I knew we had crossed the line. The line between possibility and fear, between desire and caution. And for the first time, I didn't care about the consequences. Weeks passed after that afternoon in the cafe. Nothing was simple, and nothing was easy, but every moment with her felt like stepping into a world I hadn't dared imagine before. We met in quiet corners, sometimes under the forgiving shade of the park trees, sometimes over coffees that went cold as we lost ourselves in conversation. She laughed more now, a little softer, a little freer, and I caught myself memorizing the way her shoulders moved, the tilt of her head when she was thinking. And she noticed me noticing. Sometimes she'd smile knowingly, letting the tension linger just long enough to make my heart skip. We didn't announce anything. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. The world remained the same outside our fragile bubble, with its judgments and rules. But inside we were building something fragile, beautiful, and ours. Every stolen glance, every accidental touch, every pause filled with unspoken words felt like a thread weaving us closer together. There were days when doubt crept in, Mark's presence, the risk of discovery, the whispers of what-ifs, but she never ran, and neither did I. We learned to trust the quiet between us, the small gestures that spoke volumes, the brushing of fingers across a table, a hand resting against mine for just a moment longer, the shared silences that were more intimate than any confession. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves sitting side by side on a bench beneath a canopy, the world slick and gray around us. She shivered slightly, and I draped my jacket over her shoulders without thinking, our eyes meeting in that familiar, electric way. I never thought I'd feel this, she said softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. I smiled, heart tightening. Me neither, I admitted. But I'm glad it's us. Her lips quirked, a faint smile that carried all the unspoken confessions, the fears, the longing. And in that moment, it didn't matter that the world outside might not understand. It didn't matter that the line we'd crossed could be judged or questioned. What mattered was that we had chosen each other, even in small, quiet ways, every single day. We stayed there, listening to the rain and each other, letting the moment stretch without needing to define it. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one that doesn't shout from rooftops, the one that survives in whispered conversations, in gentle touches, in stolen mornings and lingering evenings. As the rain slowed, she leaned against my shoulder, and I felt the weight of everything we had endured, the hesitation, the tension, the risk, and knew we had made it through together. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And though the future remained uncertain, and the world outside our bubble still existed with all its rules and judgments, one thing was clear: we had each other. We rose, walking side by side, hands brushing until they intertwined naturally, like it had always been meant to be. The city stretched before us, full of possibilities, full of unknowns. But in that simple, human moment, we knew, whatever came next, we'd face it together. Did you enjoy this story? What kind of journeys would you like to see next? Slow burn romances, impossible attractions, or unexpected connections that defy the odds?